Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. Sacrifice your soul or lose your mind. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Whispering Terror. Dr. Anya Petrova gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, the silence of the approaching forest pressing down on her like a physical weight. Elm Creek, nestled within the heart of the Whisperwood, was supposed to be a quaint village, a far cry from the bustling chaos of the city she left behind. Yet, the oppressive quiet that hung heavy in the air was far from peaceful. It was a suffocating blanket, muffling the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves, leaving only an unsettling stillness that gnawed at her nerves. Anya had arrived to investigate reports of mass hysteria, a string of bizarre incidents that had left the villagers shaken. News reports called it a psychosomatic epidemic, but the desperation in the villagers' voices over the phone had sent shivers down her spine. Stepping out of the car, she inhaled deeply, the crisp air doing little to dispel the prickling unease that settled in her gut. Her gaze fell upon the imposing wall of trees that marked the entrance to the Whisperwood, an emerald curtain obscuring the secrets within. The village itself was a picture postcard perfect tableau of whitewashed cottages and cobbled streets. Yet, as Anya walked towards the quaint inn where she was to stay, the smiles exchanged between villagers seemed strained, their eyes flitting nervously to the looming forest. In the village square, she encountered John, the village blacksmith, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow. Anya greeted him, but his response was a curt nod, his gaze fixed on a spiderweb clinging to the corner of the bakery. Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Anya sat in the inn's common room, sipping lukewarm tea. Across from her sat Sarah, the baker, her eyes red-rimmed and her face etched with worry. Anya had managed to coax Sarah into talking, and the woman's story sent a cold shiver down her spine. Sarah spoke of whispers in the dead of night, whispers that mimicked her voice, replaying a past betrayal with chilling accuracy. Tears welled up in her eyes as she described the spectral figures that haunted her dreams, accusations taking shape in the shadows. Anya, a staunch believer in science and logic, dismissed Sarah's story as a manifestation of guilt and a symptom of the reported hysteria. Yet, as night fell and an unnatural silence descended upon the village, a prickling sensation ran down her spine. Sleep evaded her, the oppressive quiet broken only by the creaking floorboards and the unsettling feeling of unseen eyes watching her. Then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. Anya bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. The shriek came from John's cottage, mere yards away. Grabbing a lamp, she rushed outside, her every instinct screaming at her to turn back. Reaching John's door, she found it ajar. Pushing it open, she stepped into a nightmare. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, and John lay huddled in the corner, his face contorted in a mixture of terror and revulsion. Hundreds of monstrous spiders, their bodies pulsating with an unnatural luminescence, swarmed the walls and floor. Anya's breath caught in her throat. This was no delusion. The mimic's choir, a chilling echo whispered through the room. Will you sacrifice your soul or lose your mind? The question hung in the air, a terrifying promise of what was to come. Chapter 2. A Chorus of Terrors. The grotesque tableau in John's cottage was seared into Anya's memory. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the lamp as the monstrous spiders scuttled closer. John, his eyes wide with terror, began to scream, a primal howl laced with despair. But before the sound could fully escape his lips, a deafening silence slammed down, extinguishing the lamp's flame and plunging them into suffocating darkness. Anya gasped, scrambling back and tripping over overturned furniture. The air grew thick with the skittering of the spiders, their unseen forms brushing against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. Just as panic threatened to consume her, a strong hand clamped on her shoulder. "Come, Dr. Petrova," a voice whispered urgently in her ear. It was Alara, the village elder, her eyes glinting with a strange awareness in the darkness. Anya, grateful for the human touch, stumbled after Alara out of the cottage and into the cool night air. The village square was in chaos. Villagers ran around, their faces contorted in terror, screaming at unseen horrors. A young boy, tears streaming down his face, pointed a trembling finger at the air, babbling about fiery serpents. A burly farmer, his face pale as a ghost, clutched his chest, gasping for breath as if an unseen hand constricted his lungs. The mimic's choir, a cacophony of terrified screams and whispers, echoed through the night. "They are experiencing their deepest fears," Alara explained, her voice calm amidst the pandemonium. Each villager, it seemed, was plagued by a personalized horror, a twisted reflection of their most hidden anxieties. Anya felt a cold dread creep into her heart. As she watched the villagers descend into madness, a chilling question echoed in her own mind. What terror would the mimic's choir unearth from the depths of her own psyche? The answer came in a series of unsettling whispers that began to permeate the chaos. They were fragments of a forgotten memory, a scene from a childhood filled with smoke and flames. Anya stumbled, clutching her head as the whispers intensified, threatening to drown out the screams around her. Alara noticed Anya's distress. "Hold on, doctor," she said, her voice firm, pulling Anya away from the maddening spectacle. "We need to go somewhere safe." They hurried towards the edge of the village, the oppressive silence of the whisperwood pressing against them like a physical barrier. Reaching a small, weathered cabin nestled within the first line of trees, Alara ushered Anya inside. The cabin offered a stark contrast to the pandemonium outside. A crackling fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, and the scent of wood smoke and herbs filled the air. Exhausted, Anya sank into a worn armchair, the chilling whispers receding slightly. "You are stronger than you think, Dr. Petrova," Alara said, handing her a steaming mug of herbal tea. "But to understand the mimic's choir, you must first understand the whisperwood." She gestured to a worn book lying on a nearby table. Its leather cover was embossed with an ancient symbol that sent a shiver down Anya's spine. The secrets of the whisperwood, and perhaps the key to saving these tormented souls, lay within its pages. Chapter 3: Whispers in the Wood. The warmth of the fire and the soothing aroma of the herbal tea did little to dispel the gnawing unease that clung to Anya. Alara's words, "You are stronger than you think," echoed in her mind, a challenge laced with cryptic knowledge. The book on the table beckoned, its aged pages promising answers, but a deeper dread held Anya back. "Tell me about the whisperwood," Anya finally said, her voice hoarse. "What secrets does it hold?" Alara settled onto a stool by the fire, her gaze flickering towards the window where the oppressive silence of the forest pressed against the glass. "The whisperwood," she began, her voice low and filled with a melancholic cadence, "was once a haven, a place of vibrant life and vibrant silence." She spoke of a time when the forest teemed with life, its heart filled with a peaceful stillness. The villagers, then few and respectful, lived in harmony with the wood, drawing sustenance and solace from its depths. But greed, a serpent ever coiled in the hearts of men, eventually poisoned this harmony. Anya listened intently as Alora recounted a tale of a dispute between the villagers, a fight over a hidden vein of precious minerals discovered within the forest. Blinded by avarice, they disregarded the warnings of the forest elders and began to exploit its bounty. The once peaceful silence transformed into a suffocating stillness, a silent scream of the violated earth. Then tragedy struck. A fire, fueled by carelessness and a growing sense of competition, ripped through the heart of the Whisperwood, leaving behind a wasteland of charred remains. Lives were lost, the air choked with smoke. Anya felt a cold hand grip her heart. The whispers that had plagued her in the village square intensified, morphing into vivid fragments of a forgotten memory, a raging inferno, screams lost in the crackling flames, a choking haze of smoke. She gasped, clutching her head as the horrifying scene unfolded before her inner eye. Alora, sensing Anya's distress, reached out and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "The Whisperwood remembers," she said softly. "The silence holds the echoes of that fateful day, and the entity that dwells within it feeds on the darkness in men's hearts." As Anya wrestled with the terrifying realization of her own buried past, the unsettling silence pressed in on them. The mimic's choir, no longer a distant cacophony, whispered right behind her ear, chillingly close. "You hold the key," it rasped, laced with a mocking amusement. "Sacrifice your soul or lose your mind." Terror threatened to consume Anya, but Alora's words, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness, held her back. The key, both the key to unlocking the secrets of the mimic's choir and the key to Anya's own buried trauma, lay somewhere within the oppressive silence of the Whisperwood. Anya knew, with a chilling certainty, that to save the villagers and herself, she had to confront the darkness that resided not just within the forest, but within her own shattered past. Chapter 4: Embers of the Past. The suffocating silence of the cabin morphed into the deafening roar of flames. Anya found herself engulfed in a searing inferno, the acrid smell of smoke stinging her nostrils. A young girl, no older than 10, she stumbled through the inferno, flames licking at her heels. Panic clawed at her throat, her vision blurred by tears and smoke. "Mama!" she screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony of crackling flames and crashing timber. The memory, vivid and terrifying, felt like it was happening all over again. Shame flooded her, a tide of guilt threatening to drown her whole. Alora's words echoed in the recesses of her mind. The Whisperwood remembers. The fire, a dark secret she had buried deep within, was now being unearthed by the oppressive silence of the forest. The mimic's choir, a cruel puppeteer pulling the strings of her repressed trauma. Images flickered before her eyes, a raging fire consuming a wooden house, her parents' frantic faces illuminated by the inferno's glow. A searing pain ripped through her chest as she relived the moment she was separated from them. The last desperate scramble through a broken window, the searing heat on her back as the roof caved in. The flames subsided, replaced by a suffocating darkness. Alone and coughing, she stumbled through the charred remains, the chilling silence broken only by her own ragged sobs. Guilt gnawed at her, a childish belief that she could have done something to save them, a self-inflicted blame for the tragedy. The memory shifted, fast-forwarding through a blur of tear-stained faces, hushed whispers, and a suffocating sense of loss. Anya, the once carefree child, transformed into a withdrawn, haunted girl, the fire forever etched on her soul. She learned to bury the memories, to build walls around the gaping hole in her heart, walls that the mimic's choir now threatened to shatter. But amidst the wreckage of her past, a glimmer of understanding surfaced. The fire, the source of her deepest fear, mirrored the terror inflicted by the mimic's choir on the villagers. They, too, faced their darkest secrets, their hidden anxieties amplified by the entity within the Whisperwood. Anya's terror morphed into a steely resolve. If confronting her own buried trauma was the key, then she would face the fire within, not just for her own sanity, but for the lives of the villagers trapped in the clutches of the mimic's choir. She opened her eyes, the fire in the cabin replaced by the flickering flames of Alora's lamp. Sweat clung to her skin, her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Alora, her face etched with concern, sat beside her, a gentle hand resting on hers. "The past is a burden, Dr. Petrova," Alora said, her voice soft yet firm, "but it can also be a source of strength. Will you let it consume you, or will you use it to fight back?" Anya took a deep breath, the memory of the fire still raw, but the fear tinged with a newfound determination. "I won't let it consume me," she whispered, her voice hoarse but resolute. "I will face it, and together we will fight the darkness." Chapter 5. The Unthinkable Choice. Anya's declaration hung heavy in the air, a spark of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Alara, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope, squeezed Anya's hand. "There's a way," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "An ancient ritual passed down through generations, a desperate gamble to appease the entity within the Whisperwood." Anya's heart sank. A ritual, she thought, with a chilling certainty it would involve a sacrifice. Alora continued, her voice filled with a heavy weight of history. She spoke of the Whisperwood's wrath, its hunger for vengeance, and the desperate plea of the past generations who sought to appease its anger. The ritual, she explained, demanded a sacrifice, a piece of one's soul offered in exchange for the village's peace. The entity, fueled by negative emotions, could be appeased, but at a terrible cost. The revelation hung in the air, a suffocating weight settling on Anya's chest. Anya felt a wave of nausea as she envisioned the villagers, desperate for answers, readily embracing this drastic solution. The price of silence, a piece of their soul, was too high a cost. But a glimmer of hope flickered in Alora's next words. "The ritual," she said, "requires not just any sacrifice, but a sacrifice made willingly, an offering of understanding and regret." Her gaze met Anya's, filled with a silent plea. "Perhaps, Dr. Petrova, by facing your own darkness, you can offer the entity something more potent than fear, a glimpse of redemption." Anya felt a coldness crawl up her spine. Alora was suggesting that Anya herself could be the sacrifice, not just for the villagers, but for the entity itself. The thought of confronting the fire within, not just for her sanity, but for the lives of others, sent a tremor of fear through her. The sound of panicked voices shattered the tense silence. Villagers, drawn by the firelight and rumors of a solution, gathered outside Alara's cabin. John, his face etched with desperation, pleaded for an answer. Sarah, her eyes filled with a haunted emptiness, clung to another villager for support. Alara stepped outside, her voice steady in the face of their despair. She spoke of the Whisperwood's wrath, the mimic's choir, and the desperate gamble of the ancient ritual. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd at the mention of a sacrifice. Anya watched them, their faces a tapestry of fear and desperate hope. The cost of their silence, a piece of someone's soul, was a monstrous price, yet their fear seemed to blind them to the alternative. As Alara finished explaining the ritual, the weight of the decision settled upon Anya. Would she allow them to sacrifice someone else? Or could she face the fire within, offering her own piece of darkness to appease the entity and free the village from the clutches of the mimic's choir? The answer, she knew, would determine not just her own fate, but the fate of Elm Creek and the secrets it held. Chapter 6. The Looming Threat. The news of the ritual spread like wildfire through Elm Creek. Hope flickered in the eyes of some villagers, while others grappled with the horrifying cost, a piece of their soul. The oppressive silence of the Whisperwood seemed to grow heavier, punctuated only by the rising tide of the Mimic's choir. Its whispers, once chilling pronouncements, morphed into a maddening cacophony, threatening to overwhelm their sanity. John, his face contorted in a mixture of fear and desperation, approached Anya. "Doctor," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the growing screams in his head. "Is it true? Can a sacrifice truly silence this madness?" Anya studied him, the fear in his eyes mirroring her own internal struggle. She couldn't offer him false hope. Not yet. "There is a chance," she said cautiously, "but the price is high." Sarah, tears streaming down her face, clutched Anya's arm. "We can't lose anyone else, Doctor. Please, there has to be another way." Anya squeezed her hand, a silent promise hanging in the air. Alara, her weathered face etched with worry, addressed the growing crowd. She spoke of the history of the ritual, its grim purpose, and the immense burden it placed on the one who offered the sacrifice. A tense debate erupted. Some villagers, consumed by fear, clamored for a volunteer, desperate to appease the entity and silence the tormenting whispers. Others, their faces pale with horror, rejected the ritual outright, searching for an alternative, any alternative to sacrificing a piece of themselves. Anya watched the unfolding chaos, a cold dread settling in her stomach. This wasn't the future she envisioned. The ritual, a desperate gamble, was just another form of surrender, another act fueled by fear. Suddenly, a chilling realization dawned on her. The Mimic's choir thrived on negativity, feasting on their fear and despair. The ritual itself, a symbol of their fear, might be what empowered the entity. Perhaps, she thought, there was another way, a way to break free that didn't involve sacrifice, but a confrontation of a different kind. A fierce determination hardened her resolve. The villagers needed more than a sacrifice. They needed a catalyst, a spark to ignite their own courage and face the darkness within the Whisperwood and within themselves. She wouldn't let them surrender to fear, wouldn't let the Mimic's choir win. With newfound clarity, Anya stepped forward, her voice ringing out above the cacophony of shouts and pleas. "Enough," she cried, her voice firm. "There is another way. We won't surrender to fear, and we won't sacrifice one of our own." Silence descended upon the crowd, broken only by the ragged gasps for breath. Anya met their startled gazes, her eyes burning with a newfound resolve. "We need to fight back," she continued, "not with fear, but with courage. We need to confront the truth, not just about the Whisperwood, but about ourselves." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Anya's words, laced with a quiet strength, were a stark contrast to the hysteria that had gripped the village. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a glimmer of hope after all. Chapter 7. Unveiling the Truth. Days bled into nights as the oppressive silence of the Whisperwood clung to Elm Creek like a shroud. Yet, a subtle shift had taken place. Anya's defiant stance had sparked a flicker of hope, replacing blind fear with a burgeoning sense of resolve. Led by Alara, the villagers embarked on a journey deep into the heart of the forest, not for a desperate ritual, but for a confrontation of a different kind. Alara guided them through a labyrinth of gnarled trees and overgrown paths, its oppressive silence broken only by the crunch of leaves under their feet. Finally, they emerged into a hidden clearing, a haven untouched by the suffocating stillness. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled light on the lush undergrowth, a stark contrast to the charred wasteland that surrounded them. The mimic's choir, sensing their approach, intensified its assault. Shrieking whispers and mocking echoes filled the air, a chilling counterpoint to the unsettling beauty of the clearing. But the villagers, faces drawn but resolute, stood firm. Anya stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the assembled faces. She saw fear, yes, but also a flicker of defiance, a willingness to face the truth. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "We gather here not to appease an angry entity," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound strength, "but to confront a darkness that resides not just within the Whisperwood, but within ourselves." As she spoke, her voice trembling at times with suppressed emotion, Anya narrated a forgotten memory. She painted a vivid picture of a past generation, a younger Elora, and her own parents amidst a celebratory bonfire. But the revelry turned to tragedy as carelessness and a growing sense of competition among the villagers fueled the flames, causing them to rage out of control. The fire, once a symbol of joy, became a monstrous inferno, consuming the heart of the Whisperwood and claiming innocent lives, including Anya's parents. Tears welled up in her eyes as she relived the searing pain of loss, the guilt that had festered within her for years. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the truth unfolded. Shock and horror were etched on their faces as they recognized their ancestors in Anya's story, their own past transgressions mirrored in the flames that had ravaged the forest. The mimic's choir, sensing the shift in emotions, unleashed a final, distorted shriek of defiance. But its power seemed to diminish, the chilling echoes losing their bite. For the entity within the Whisperwood thrived on their negative emotions, their fear, their greed, their guilt. And by confronting the truth, by acknowledging their shared culpability, they were severing its hold. Elora, her weathered face filled with a newfound resolve, stepped forward. Inspired by Anya's courage, she led the villagers in a collective apology, a plea for forgiveness directed at the ravaged Whisperwood and the spirits it harbored. It wasn't a sacrifice, but a heartfelt expression of remorse, an acknowledgement of their past mistakes. Tears streamed down faces, confessions tumbled out in ragged gasps. The clearing echoed with raw emotion, a cathartic release of long-buried guilt and a desperate yearning for redemption. As their voices faded, a profound silence descended, an unsettling quiet devoid of malice, a stark contrast to the oppressive stillness that had choked the village for so long. A single bird chirped, its melody a beacon of hope in the clearing. The villagers, their faces etched with newfound determination, exchanged glances. There was no clear answer yet, no guarantee of forgiveness. But they had taken the first step, a step away from fear and towards understanding. The future remained uncertain, but with the truth unveiled and a collective spirit of responsibility rekindled, Elm Creek, and perhaps the Whisperwood itself, might finally begin to heal. Chapter 8. The Haunting Silence. The journey back to Elm Creek felt lighter, despite the weight of their shared revelation. The oppressive silence of the Whisperwood no longer pressed down on them. It remained, a watchful presence, but its stillness held a new quality, a peaceful blank slate, devoid of malice. As they emerged from the forest's embrace, the village came into view, its whitewashed cottages and cobbled streets bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. A sense of bittersweet homecoming settled over Anya. Elm Creek would forever be marked by the horrors they had faced, but a seed of hope had been planted. The villagers, faces drawn but resolute, dispersed to their homes, a newfound sense of unity binding them together. The shared experience, The confrontation of their past transgressions had forged a silent pact, a promise to protect the Whisperwood and ensure such a tragedy never befell them again. Anya stood beside Elara on the outskirts of the village, the silence stretching out before them. Exhaustion gnawed at her, both physical and emotional. The past week had taken a toll, ripping open old wounds and forcing her to confront the darkness within. Elara placed a hand on Anya's shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "You have done well, Dr. Petrova. You helped us break free from the shackles of the past." Anya nodded, a flicker of doubt lingering in her eyes. Had they truly broken free, or had they merely appeased the entity within the Whisperwood? The question hung heavy in the air, a lingering uncertainty. Elara seemed to sense her unease. "The silence may hold echoes of the past," she said, her gaze fixed on the dark silhouette of the forest, "but it also holds the promise of a new beginning." A lone bird chirped, its melody a sound that had been absent for so long. Anya closed her eyes for a moment, the haunting silence washing over her. It was peaceful, yes, but a faint echo of the mimic's choir still resonated within its depths, a chilling reminder of the entity's power. The villagers, forever marked by the experience, began to rebuild their lives. Houses were repaired, gardens replanted, and a cautious optimism filled the air. Yet, the memory of the mimic's choir served as a constant reminder, a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and the power of collective responsibility. Anya lingered on the outskirts of the village, her gaze drawn towards the Whisperwood. She wasn't sure if she carried a piece of her soul, sacrificed, or if confronting the truth had been enough to break free from the mimic's hold. Perhaps, she thought, the answer wasn't as important as the journey itself. They had faced their darkness, unearthed their buried guilt, and emerged stronger, bound together by a shared purpose. As long as they remembered the lessons learned, the silence, while a haunting echo of the past, could also be a promise for a brighter future.